John McMullen will be there, and he appears now via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. John, sir, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, I one thing I've missed, Mike, is Sixers Twitter.
It's back, man. Hey, you should wake up to my Sixers Twitter.
Well, the analytics say if you look out through the entire season, they're on pace to go 0-82. So the sky is falling.
Don't forget tonight, Mosher, McMullen, and Krause. We had Mosher on in the first hour, McMullen on now. Krause tonight, 6 to 8 from the landmark Americana. They'll have plenty of talk on this game. But let's dive into some stuff because this game's interesting. We talked about it yesterday. They played Carolina last year on a Thursday night down there. And it was kind of the game that made you say, I think I believe in the Eagles. Let me ask you this. Where is Carolina right now in the pantheon of the NFC East?
Well,
not the NFC East,
they're
the
not
NFC
the NFC
Conference.
East, but the
right,
NFC.
right, the NFC
yeah,
Conference.
I mean, they're a potential playoff team. They're a good team. They're not a great team. I don't think they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, but they're a legitimate playoff contender. So it is a big game from that perspective. It is, you talk about last year's game on a short week going on the road to beat a good team. I think that was sort of a signature moment. This time it's sort of, you want to see if that Giants thing was real. And if they kind of hold serve and dominate at Lincoln Financial Field, get back to what they were before the Vikings game, maybe you start to think the switch has been turned on and the Eagles will get back to where they were.
One thing with this Panthers team, Cam Newton, obviously, staple, but I thought when they played Carolina last year, McCaffrey wasn't really didn't have a role yet, maybe? Is that fair to say?
No, I think he had a role, but I think they were feeling their way and trying to figure it out with him because he is a very unique player, and he's a perfect player for the modern game. So he's when you talk about matchups in this league, he's one of those guys that should be and could be one of the more difficult people to deal with because I remember when he was back at the Combine and people were telling me that he ran routes better than receivers. And he can run the ball. And he can run it not only sort of a speed outside guy, even though he's not the biggest guy in the world. You have to respect him because he can run it between the tackles. He's just a really good player. And remember, the Eagles loved him. And if there was a chance, and early in the process, there was some thought that he would be about going 20, 21 range. Eagles would have snapped him up, but then all of a sudden he went in the top 10.
John, whose health should we be most concerned about heading into Sunday?
Let's see, whose health? I would have to say the guys who are going to play. I think you would have to say Jason Peters. I mean, I think it's kind of amazing.
Johnson added today, right? Limited?
Yeah, well, he didn't practice yesterday, so he was limited today. So he's actually a bit of an upgrade. That, to me, it's more of a load management thing. They're trying to get him to Sundays, dealing with that ankle injury. He's going to play through it. There's no question about that. But he wasn't able to finish the Giants game, and that's going to be a concern for a couple weeks. But I think if you look at Jason Peters, look, it's not only the biceps, it's the quad. It's coming off the ACL. It seems like everything is sort of breaking down, and that's what happens with 36-year-old players. So Big V's got to be ready, and it's almost like that every week. But that age thing, it's not only Jason Peters, Corey Graham didn't practice again, Darren Sproles didn't practice again.
Who?
Elodie Nada.
Who was that last name? You said Darren who?
Yeah, exactly.
Forget what the guy looks like.
Elodie Nada is still limited, but he'll probably go with the cap. But these are all the over 30 guys, and they've all been banged up.
John, what does the offensive line look like if and when Jason Peters or Lane Johnson goes down, or both of them go down? What's Who's getting plugged in where? Because I know there's some versatility there with with the reserves.
Well, you kind of saw it last week because Peters was out in the third quarter, and then Lane was forced to go out. Although I think that was more of the fact they were winning the game and it was in hand. So if you don't have both of them, Vaitai is going to be the left tackle. Isaac is going to kick out to right tackle for Lane, and then Wiz comes back in at left guard. And that's one thing. There's been a lot of criticism. Isaac Seumalo's actually played really well against the Giants, but his versatility is pretty impressive because he can play every position on the offensive line, and there aren't many people who can do that.
And he played pretty well in the Giant game, from where he struggled for a couple of plays. And it's funny, when you struggle for a couple of plays, it's like a cornerback who – 80 snaps, plays well for 74 of them, and 6 he doesn't, you stink. Same with an offensive lineman. If you play 80 snaps and you play really well, but we see you give up that one sack, we look at you and say, hey, you had a bad game. It seemed that Seumalo has settled in a bit.
Yeah, it has. I think it was 2 of the first 3 plays he got blown up against Minnesota, and everybody rolled their eyes and said, here we go again.
Right.
And then from that point forward, he was pretty darn good, and he was really good against the Giants. And the fact that he had to move from left guard out to right tackle, he played both positions, played both well. He seems to have gotten it. Isaac is not one. We got to talk to him yesterday in the locker room. Typically, he doesn't speak to us. Was kind of informed that there's going to be a fine coming his way if he didn't speak to us because that's league rules. So he did, and he was really insightful, and he's a really engaging guy when he does talk. But he's put on 20 pounds. He's bigger. He's stronger, and it's showing up. And he's starting to look like a former third-round pick.
Which is, we had questioned about whether or not they were just making a move just to make a move. Maybe they did see something in practice that this guy gives them more athleticism on that line.
Yeah, no question he's more athletic than Wiz. No question he has a higher ceiling, all that. Just a better pedigree. But that doesn't necessarily make you a better player. Jeff Stoutland, the assistant coach, has talked earlier this week as well. And Jeff said, hey, that's my job, is to get the best 5 players out there. And he felt Isaac had advanced to the point where he was in that group, one of the best 5. And it wasn't really an indictment of Stefan Wisniewski. They just felt that Isaac had sort of recovered, because I think last year when he was given the starting job, and that was a mistake. That was the biggest mistake. They kind of gave him that job without making him earn it. And then he lost some confidence. So it's been a while, but they were able to rebuild it throughout the offseason, and he seems to be back.
John, when you look at this game specifically, I know the Panthers didn't put up a 30 last week against the Skins, but 2 of the last 3 weeks they've been able to put up 30-plus points. This defense has been really good for Philadelphia as far as bending and not breaking. But you look at 2 areas of concern, for me at least, the ability to throw to a running back out of the backfield and a mobile quarterback maybe at its best in Cam Newton. How do you look at Jim Schwartz and this defense matching up against those 2 areas that have been a weakness at times for the Eagles?
Yeah, it's difficult. I talked about it a little bit earlier in the week. When you have a quarterback and you have designed runs, it sort of takes it up a notch from even the zone read stuff, read option stuff. They'll just run a quarterback keeper, a design quarterback off tackle. Cam's so bigger than Jordan Hicks. He's bigger than Nigel Bradham. He's tough to deal with in the running game, and that's why the Panthers are so good as a running attack, because you have that extra added sort of part to it, which makes it more difficult to deal with. You essentially have an extra blocker on every play, and you got to deal with the extra player. So it's got to be sort of an alignment and assignment game. The Eagles got to make sure they fill their gaps, and that becomes more difficult because of what you just said and the fact that then you have Christian McCaffrey to deal with. And Jordan Hicks is going to be concerned with him, all the linebackers. At times, you'll even want to put a safety on him. He's that good. So from that standpoint, it's difficult. What helps you a little bit is they don't have much at the receiver position that is going to scare you. They don't have a lot of explosive plays, 2 receivers. So you don't have to worry about that as much, which kind of helps you with the underneath stuff.
John, who's set up to have a really potentially big game this week against the Panthers with this matchup? Like, where do they maybe, or where are they a little bit weak where the Eagles are strong? Like, is it a game for Alshon Jeffrey? Is it a game for the tight end spot with Ertz? Or is it Clement and Smallwood? Or maybe somewhere on the defensive end? What, by breaking down this matchup, who's possibly prone to have a really big game for the Eagles?
Well, I would think it'd be Alshon. Their best corner is probably James Bradbury, who does have some size. I don't know if they'll travel him with Alshon, but if you think about it, you're not going to see better linebackers in the NFL than Carolina brings to the table. So you would think it's not going to be as easy for Zach Ertz as it's been. And they tend to play – I don't think they play dime all year. That's how good their linebackers are. They just. I mean, they hate to take Shaq Thompson off the field. They're never going to take Kuechly off the field, obviously, and you have Thomas Davis who just returned. I mean, they're just really good at that particular position. So you tend to not want to tempt fate and attack those linebackers. So I think this is a week where the wide receivers and perhaps you can add Nelson Aguilar into that mix can finally get going a little bit.
Where are we, John, on the whole trade front? I don't mean Le'Veon Bell. I just mean any name in general. I know that it was a hot topic with a running back, and then it kind of bred other conversations about, well, maybe they should get a cornerback, and I know Patrick Peterson's name was out there. I'm not asking specifically with Peterson, just in general. Where are we on that front?
Well, the Eagles, I firmly believe they're certainly trying to make a move. They're certainly trying to add, and I believe they will at some point. I don't necessarily think it's going to be the big splashy move that everybody wants to see. Patrick Peterson's not going to be traded, and I think the Steelers would love to get rid of Le'Veon Bell, but we talked about it. It's just not a fit here because of the cost, not only going what you have to get Pittsburgh, but also what you're going to have to pay Le'Veon Bell. And then you got to re-sign him on top of it. Or it's just a rental, sort of a baseball-like move, which you don't typically see in the NFL because it's generally not really a plug-and-play league. Even with a guy as talented as that, it's hard to say you're going to get him for a half season and that's it. That doesn't tend to work out in the NFL. And then the second part is, just like everything else, deadlines kind of spur action in this league. So while everyone looked at the Eagles and said, well, they got to get something done now, they got to get something done before the bye. Remember, the deadline is October 30th, and remember, there's two sides. Just because the Eagles want to get something done doesn't mean the other team wants to get something done. So you're going to see most of the action take place as we get closer to October 30th.
Yeah, and how much, John, I know we talk about this from time to time when you look at the Seahawks seem to be that model with Russell Wilson. They won because they weren't paying him. They had to pay him, and now they've lost everything else, and now they're just an average team that Howie Roseman says, now's the time that I have to be aggressive because I got to pay my quarterback at some point, so I'm taking my shots while the quarterback's under the rookie deal.
Yeah, I mean, that's the easiest way to build a roster. That's the easiest way to build a deep roster, and we talk about it all the time. It's going on with the Rams. It happened with the Eagles. You mentioned the Seahawks, but there are still other ways to do it. The Patriots have been pretty good, and even though Tom Brady tends to take less money than top-tier quarterbacks, they've been paying him for a very, very long time, and they've done just fine. So I think you always look at it and say, if you hit on a young quarterback on his rookie deal, that window opens and maybe you can have the most talented roster in the league. But I'll tell you what, if I have the Bradys and the Drew Breeses and the Aaron Rodgers of the world, I'm gonna write that check, and I'm gonna do it happily, because the Eagles are gonna do it with Carson Wentz, and then you kind of figure out the rest.
John McMullen tonight, Mosher, McMullen, and Krause, 6 to 8, right after us from the Landmark Americana. You can hear more Eagles and NFL talk as they get ready for the Panthers, and that is each and every Thursday night. And, of course, each and every day, John is right here with us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. John, thanks so much, pal.
All right, thanks, guys.